Chapter 16. The Shadows of Shades. Saiyah and Riley appeared in the middle of a small town, standing in the glow of the full moon above them. They had returned to the castle and successfully reclaimed the Creation Stone. Scrying with a flask, they had found that Lord Arden was several miles outside of the town of Amira in the woods of Redeth. Both doubled over as soon as they landed in the village, attempting to catch their breath from having to teleport so much. Riley immediately sprawled out in the snow, breathing heavily.
Damn! How the hell does Kye make that look easy?
Because he is a traveler, and we are not.
As she caught her breath, Saiyah slowly looked up to observe her surroundings. The village looked much different from the last time she had visited. The villagers had clearly evacuated from the attack of the Shades. The darkness and quiet seemed to invade every building, almost like a sickness. The only sounds heard were the snow falling and the soft patter of ice hitting the fountain in the center of town. Saiyah looked at the forest to the west. Not even the moon's glow could penetrate the thick interwoven trees. It made a prime location for Shades. As Riley stood up, Saiyah pointed to the forest.
That is our destination,
Saiyah stated as Riley nodded. Thankfully, their eyes were well adjusted to seeing in the dark, which was good, since Saiyah desperately wanted to avoid attracting any attention by summoning a light. Shades were still scattered in droves throughout Iselia, and Saiyah wished to avoid a confrontation with them at all costs. Saiyah and Riley slowly made their way into the forest, keeping their eyes peeled. Riley's animal instincts were in full swing as his focus narrowed on every sound and slight movement. A soft crunching could be heard as the pair trekked through the freshly fallen snow. Saiyah wasn't sure how deep Lord Arden was within the forest. She desperately hoped that he had not already teleported to another location by this point. Riley suddenly stopped, issuing a low growl. "Saiyah?" Saiyah followed his line of sight to see a person standing in their path. They stood a bit away, so Saiyah could not make out any facial features, save for their eyes, reflecting light like a night-bound predator. Saiyah already knew this was not a villager. This was not a person at all anymore. This was a shade. Saiyah heard a chilling voice echo inside her mind.
Pretty little elf, cut her open. Watch her bleed.
You know how to fight these things? Riley inquired as his fangs began to grow and his fingers sprouted claws.
I've read about them,
Saiyah admitted as she took a defensive stance. Riley chuckled slightly.
Nothing like practical application, he muttered.
Riley didn't even waste time removing his robes, instantly shifting to his fearsome fox counterpart. He bared his fangs toward the creature and growled. The shade responded by tilting their head and letting loose a bone-chilling scream. Saiyah cringed, the sound rattling around inside her skull. Moments after the horrible sound ended, Saiyah saw the shadows around them begin to move, slowly forming into shapes, becoming one shade after another. Dozens of voices now bounced around inside her mind, bombarding her with images of her and Riley's death, dismemberment, and nightmarish end. Saiyah steeled her thoughts to block out the horrific images, focusing on the shades around her.
Skin the fox.
Take their eyes.
Make them scream.
Watch them die.
Saiyah turned in a circle, and her pulse quickened. They were now completely surrounded. The original shade held up its hand as its fingers grew to knife-like points. The other shades immediately followed suit and began closing in.
Well, fuck,
Riley uttered in his animal form. In an instant, the shades shrieked and rushed toward them. They were as fast as lightning, moving through shadow like a fish through water. Saiyah responded by summoning a ball of light. The shades retreated from the light and simply kept to the shadows of the trees to continue their advance. Riley lunged forward, clasping one in his teeth and biting down. The shade issued a horrifying scream and continued to slash at Riley's face even as he was killing it. Two other shades rushed behind him as Riley swiped at them with his claws. Saiyah tried to shoot a light spell toward him to help, but a shade rushed up toward her and slashed at her from behind. Deep Claws tore at her back as Saiyah was knocked to the ground. She quickly rolled over in the snow to shoot an evocation spell at her attacker.
Soinane!
A ball of light shot the shade square in the chest, knocking it back about 20 feet. It lay on the ground, shrieking from Saya's attack as she felt the wounds on her back already starting to heal. Saiyah spun around to a yelp. Riley had about 5 of them on him, slashing at him from all sides, black blood staining his fur. Saiyah began to summon another ball of light when sharp claws tore open the side of her face. Saiyah was knocked back down into the snow as 3 shades descended on her at once. They were ripping furiously at her, wounds being created as soon as they healed. Saiyah tried to utter a spell as one tore at her neck. She choked as silver blood filled her throat. She attempted to roll away from her attackers to protect her head and heart. As she pulled her arms up, the shades continued to swipe at her, not even offering the smallest opening for her to fight back. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the trees. "Solaris Lyrel!" A wave of light stampeded through the forest, bending trees in its wake. It was daylight in the dead of the night. Every shadow was illuminated, leaving nowhere to hide. As soon as the light hit the shades, they let out a horrendous scream and began twisting on the ground in agony, dying. 2 of the shades attacking Riley broke off, outrunning the light by rushing out further into the darkness. Saiyah lifted her head up in time to see Maester Gaelic and Maester Varen race out into the night after them. The light spell slowly faded away. Saiyah looked at Riley as she carefully stood up. He had shifted back to his human form and had a hand over some fairly deep claw marks on his left side. "Acolytes were told to remain at the castle and protect the travel orbs," a familiar voice stated. Saiyah and Riley turned to see Maester Arden step forward from the shadows. Unlike Saiyah and Riley, he did not carry even a scratch from his prolonged battle with the Shades. Considering the light magic he had just summoned to save them, Saiyah seriously doubted the Shades could even get close enough to lay a finger on him. After witnessing it firsthand, she could not deny he was truly a powerful mage indeed. Arden looked back and forth between Saiyah and Riley. "So, you both want to tell me what the hell you're doing out here?" "We were looking for you, actually," Riley replied. He had collected the torn bits of his robe off the ground and was trying to use them as bandages over his wounds. Arden raised an eyebrow. "Me?" he inquired as Saiyah stepped toward him.
Kye asked us to come, to give you this."
Saiyah pulled the creation stone from her pocket and handed it to Arden. As soon as the stone touched his hand, Arden's eyes narrowed in confusion. "And why did my acolyte entrust this to the 2 of you instead of delivering it himself? Where is Kye?" Saiyah's face fell.
"In trouble, my lord. In very serious trouble."
Kye suddenly appeared in an underground forest temple, one of the hidden areas he had found while exploring Iselia. It had clearly been an impressive structure during its time, but it had now fallen into disarray, nature almost completely overtaking the stone. He leaned against one of the nearest stone pillars, desperately trying to catch his breath before he jumped again. For the last few hours, he had been leading Umbree on a chase around Iselia. Now, his stamina was about at its end, the cold sapping the strength from him as much as traveling was. The healing spell that Saiyah had cast had long since worn off, and the wound on his shoulder was still not completely healed. After hours of running, exhaustion and pain were starting to overtake him. Kye knew he had to keep going, though. He couldn't let Umbree catch up. He only had a few moments to rest before Umbree would locate him.
"Phasma Lyra!"
Kye heard a voice shout. He looked down to see something like a rope of light shoot up from the temple floor and wrap itself around his left leg. Shit! He had waited too long. Kye didn't waste time trying to figure out what the light rope was. He immediately tried to jump again to escape its clutches. Ah! Kye screamed before he could even finish the incantation. He was forcibly ripped back to his current location mid-jump as his body hit the stone floor, writhing in agony. As he had tried to teleport, Kye could feel the rest of his body start to disappear in preparation to jump. His leg, however, did not. The rope that bound his left leg seemed to prevent it from jumping with the rest of him. Kye had felt the flesh and bone tearing away from the rest of his body as he tried. He looked down at his left leg. There was a clear cut in his robes around the newly formed injury as blood seeped into the surrounding cloth. A deep gash was now visible in a full circle around his thigh, just above where the light rope ended. Kye was shocked his leg was still attached to the rest of him, for it had felt as though it had been torn clean off.
"Spectral snare,"
Umbree clarified as he approached.
"One of the few things that can trap a traveler. By all means, feel free to jump again, boy. That leg, of course, will not be going with you if you do. Should make running a bit more difficult."
Kye rolled over and held a hand toward the ceiling.
Intrika!
He shouted as the vines stretching across the ceiling immediately extended down and wrapped themselves around Umbree. He took advantage of Umbree's momentary distraction to pull the dagger from his belt that Riley had given him and began slashing at the light snare around his leg. No matter how hard he cut it, the rope wouldn't break. Umbree burned the vines trying to ensnare him, hissing, "Perkura!" as he pointed at the weapon Kye held. The dagger was knocked from Kye's hand and flew into the opposite wall, inserting itself deep within the stone. Kye spun and shouted, "Lapis Seeker!" as a stone shard from the floor hurtled itself furiously at Umbree. Umbree easily waved the attack away and responded by pointing his hand at Kye. "Fulgortella!" Kye tried to bring up a barrier, but Umbree's spell easily shot through it. Once again, the bolt of lightning tore through Kye, bombarding him with anguish and robbing him of the last ounces of energy he had to fight. When Umbree silenced the spell, Kye was still, unable to move as air filled his lungs in uneven spurts. He turned toward Umbree, his eyes glaring, telling him he would fight to his last breath.
"Still stubbornly denying your fate, huh, boy? I must admit, you're certainly more surprising than I thought possible for a human. Had you not betrayed me, I might have considered keeping you as my vassal."
Kye began to laugh weakly, reveling in the absurdity of Umbree's statement. Umbree, however, was unamused.
"What's so funny?"
You, speaking to me of betrayal. You sold out your brethren, betrayed your oath, and cost countless lives. For what? A few pieces of silver and gold?
You think this is about money?
Isn't everything with you?
Umbree walked up to Kye and knelt beside him on the floor. Kye tensed, preparing for another assault. The Goblin Master, however, seemed to take a moment from torturing him to make him understand.
If I had sold that stone to a collector, I would have been wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I could have bought a magnificent mansion, silks, gems of the rarest variety. I could have had women, admirers, power. But you know the one thing I couldn't buy, boy?
A conscience?
Time. That is what Arden offered me.
I don't understand.
I am old. I will die far sooner than I would like. Arden offered me freedom from death. He offered me immortality.
Kye's eyes widened in dismay. The longest living creature in the 6 realms were elves, and even they got 1,000 years, no more. Nothing was immortal. Nothing could be. All life eventually came to an end.
That's impossible.
For many mages, yes. But my master has already lived beyond the span of an ordinary elf's life. Far beyond. He has the power to bestow it, and will do so to those that serve him. And what of you?
Me?
You are human. Your life is short, growing shorter by the minute. Would you not like to live longer, to see more? Arden can grant it.
Kye's vision narrowed. Humans had the shortest life of any being. To offer the chance for a longer life? What human wouldn't wish for it? But some prices were too high to pay, and Kye understood that, even if Umbree didn't.
And all it would cost me is my soul? If those are my options, I choose death.
Umbree snarled.
So be it.
Umbree held a hand up to Kye's head.
Mantibus oculus!
Kye instantly tries to raise his barriers as Umbree attempted to invade his mind once again.
No worries, boy,
he heard Umbree state as the temple around Kye began to dim.
I shall grant you the death you seek, but first, I will shatter your mind to turn you into an obedient puppet and arm you with that dagger of yours. Then, when Arden arrives with the stone to collect you, you will be the one to run him through.
No!
Kye shouted internally as the room around him once again went dark. In an act of desperation, Kye's hand shot up and grabbed hold of the staff in Umbree's hand. Umbree's face contorted in a look of surprise as he temporarily stopped the spell and tried to rip the staff back from Kye's grasp, but Kye held fast.
Demora!
Kye shouted as his body and the staff started to phase in preparation to jump. Kye could feel his leg being torn from him, but he fought through the pain and grabbed the onyx staff with both hands. The staff faded along with Kye, slipping from Umbree's hold. Once the staff was ethereal along with the rest of him, Kye shoved the staff forward like a spear, driving it through Umbree's chest. He then instantly suspended the spell, bringing the staff and himself back to corporeal form. Umbree shot up and stumbled back, looking down at the fully solid onyx staff now impaling him. He looked back at Kye in shock, as Kye stared back at him, frozen in disbelief. Umbree tilted and began coughing up green blood as he stumbled forward. His upright position only lasted a few more moments before he dropped to his knees, continuing to throw up green blood on the cold stone temple floor. He tried to speak, but the only sound that came out was a wet, gurgling noise. He gave Kye one last look of shock as he reached for him, almost as though he was seeking help. Umbree's body then fell forward and shuddered slightly, before remaining still. Kye's breathing was heavy. He sat for a long time, staring at Umbree's immobile form. He slowly looked down to see his hands coated in green blood that belonged to his former master. His breath came in short bursts, and the world around him seemed quiet, save for the tumultuous sounds of his heartbeat. He kept waiting for Umbree to rise, to attack, to lash out. But he just lay there, silent and still. Kye looked on in dismay. His whole body was shaking uncontrollably. He wasn't sure if it was from shock or blood loss. It took a while for the truth to sink in. He had killed him. He had killed Umbree. Kye felt as though he were sinking. Why should he care? Shouldn't he be glad that Umbree was dead? Shouldn't he be glad that he killed him? The mere mention of the word caused Kye's stomach to turn as he shut his eyes to try and calm himself. Kye turned his attention away from the corpse, looking down at his leg. The light rope that had held him was now gone, but his leg was twisted at an odd angle, as though it was no longer part of his body. A pool of red blood was forming underneath him, and Kye felt cold. He didn't have the strength to even attempt a healing spell. He tore off strips from the hem of his robes. He wrapped the cloth around his wound as tight as he could stand. He had to slow the bleeding, at least until Arden could find him. As Kye worked on bandaging his wound, he thought he caught a movement out of the corner of his eye. He looked up at Umbree. He was lying perfectly still, but Kye couldn't shake an eerie feeling. "Umbree?" Kye whispered. He somehow knew he would not receive a response, but he could not stop himself from asking the question. Had the movement he thought he saw been just a figment of his imagination? Kye looked once again at Umbree's still body, focusing on it intently, just to be sure. "Umbree?" A hand shot forward and grabbed Kye's throat. Kye tried to jump back, but the grip on his neck was unbreakable. Umbree's immobile form began to contort in an unnatural fashion as his head snapped upward. He was smiling, and his grin stretched far past the normal confines of his mouth, but Kye could only see his eyes. His pupils were black as coal, revealing an unending emptiness. This was not Umbree. Kye thrashed at the arm that held him with both hands, trying to lessen the hold, trying to breathe, trying to cast, trying to escape. The unknown entity responded to Kye's attempts to break free by slamming him hard against the stone ground. The thing now towered over Kye, that ever-expanding smile looming over him. His eyes were drilling right into Kye's, and Kye felt the darkness consuming him as he fought for breath.
You think you can kill me, human?
A voice asked Kye. It sounded so far away, even though it was right in front of him. The words caused ice to spread through Kye as he struggled harder to free himself.
I am death itself. I am immortal. And you, spawn of Ain, are not.
Kye wasn't able to get free, even though he fought with all the strength he had left against the hand that held him. He could feel himself floating, those black eyes boring into him, and that unnatural smile welcoming his death. Kye's grip on the hand that held him was loosening. His eyes began to roll back, and he slowly started falling into darkness. Manus Letio! A voice boomed as the hand that held Kye's throat was ripped from him. Kye filled his lungs with a raspy breath, lying on the stone temple floor. As he forced his eyes open, he slowly focused his gaze. He could see Umbree, pinned to the ceiling above him. As Kye turned his head, he saw Arden standing in the middle of the temple, his right hand pointed toward Umbree, and his face contorted in rage. Kye had never seen him so angry. All things in the room seemed to bend to his command. The thing that was Umbree flailed and fought against the ceiling fruitlessly. Inferna Pyrena! Arden hissed as the entire ceiling erupted into a bright blue fire that spread from Umbree and to every corner of the room. Kye could feel the heat from the ceiling blasting against his skin, even from the floor. It seemed to beat back the ice that was creeping over him. Umbree's body quickly burned from flesh to bones to ash. Arden didn't hesitate, didn't falter, staring at Umbree's burning form without compassion or remorse. It was at that moment Kye understood why Arden was said to be the strongest mage on the council. Why it was that Umbree had feared him, and he'd had cause to. Arden was a terrifying force, different from the blunt, sarcastic master that Kye had come to know. This mage controlled hellfire, and would burn all those deserving of the flame. Once the thing that had been Umbree was gone, the magic staff disintegrated in the fire. Ash rained down like snow upon the floor. As soon as he suspended the flames, Arden immediately turned his attention to Kye, rushing over to where he lay. He seemed to be moving in slow motion, along with the ash and snow falling down around them. Kye was trying to keep his eyes open, but his eyelids felt like they were lead, and he found them drifting closed despite his best efforts. He just needed to rest. He would just close his eyes for a moment. Kye was vaguely aware of Arden kneeling next to him. He sounded like he was casting a spell. He thought Arden was talking to him, something about staying awake, but he could barely hear him, almost like he was speaking through water. His words were garbled, and the quiet was slowly drowning it out. Amongst the silence drifting over him, Kye thought he caught Arden shout, "Kye! Stay with me, kid!" Kye was confused as the darkness overtook him. What did he mean? Arden sounded concerned, but Kye didn't know why. He wasn't going anywhere. He was just tired. That was all. He just needed to sleep. The sun was breaking over the horizon. Arden stood on the hill, watching a group of shades chased by an orc mage into a cave. He was disappointed that all his efforts to gain his prize had gone to waste. The fact that Umbree had failed was disappointing, to say the least. The fact he had met his end at the hands of a human was even more so.
So, Umbree was useless,
Amon growled, equally frustrated that Umbree had proved so utterly disappointing. Arden sighed.
Yes, but we know who has the stone, so we can gain it another time. And if his information was correct, the council should be sufficiently distracted so we can collect a consolation prize.
Arden then turned to Amon.
Go and fetch it for me, would you, my friend?
Amon bowed.
Yes, master.
In an instant, Amon vanished. Arden pondered the events of the evening. He would have strangled that annoying human mage had Arden not arrived. He was proving to be a nuisance, one that he would have to take care of soon enough. For now, the Magi had won this battle. However, Arden would win the war. With a final look toward the horizon, Arden vanished from sight and from Iselia.